Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Casual Word and Casual Word Radio, where we continued our endeavor to change the world one word at a time. I'm your host, Langley, and today it is an honor and a privilege to have my guest on. We see each other quite often in the community. He's definitely a staple of Bristol, and his church is definitely one of the foundational houses of refuge and places where you can get to know Christ. And that is the incomparable William Reid, the Reverend Reid at uh, New Hope Baptist Church there in Bristol. And thank you, sir, for being here.
Thank you.
I know you're someone that I've definitely been trying to catch up with and have you on the show. Kind of when I envisioned the pastor series, there were several people who jumped right out of my mind that I wanted to have, and certainly you were one of them. So thank you for being here again. So you've been there at New Hope for how long now?
I'm going into my 29th year at New Hope.
At New Hope.
Yes.
Okay. How long, I guess, have you been in ministry prior to that? I'm assuming?
Several years. If I see January, I will celebrate 50 years.
50 years in ministry.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a long time to be doing anything. Definitely a blessing. So I guess we'll jump right into, especially with what we've been seeing here lately in our society, in our country. Obviously something that you've been familiar with.
Yes.
I don't really want to ask what the similarities and differences are, but at that stage in your ministry, back early on during desegregation and during the civil rights, you were in ministry. What were some of the bigger challenges that you faced as a leader at that point? Were you in this area?
I know. Actually, I was born and raised in Anniston, Alabama, Northeast Alabama, which was the melting pot of a lot of racial unbalance.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to meet and see guys like the late Reverend Dr. King, David Abernathy, Jesse Jackson, Walter Pond Troy, and the list goes on.
Wow.
That we were able to, as a kid now, see them active in our communities. I remember when the bus was bombed on Highway 202, right outside of town in Anniston, Alabama, where the Freedom Riders were going from Atlanta to Birmingham. I remember that. I remember, of course, when the little girls were killed in Birmingham, Alabama.
Right.
And these things, we have unfortunately had to experience some of the ugly monstrosities of racism during the years. However, God give us a resource that we're able to keep us together and grow us and mature us and keep us during these challenging times.
Absolutely. And I guess with that, it's often said by, I don't want to say from people outside of maybe the African-American culture, African-American church as a body, that, one of the staples of our strength and our foundation is our faith and our belief in Christ. Right. Did you see that as something that was able to continue to keep everybody together even during those times, and obviously as we're going forward now?
Right. Really, there was nothing else we had because we couldn't go to basically anywhere but to church where we were literally recognized as being human and somebody.
Right. And wow. So that was the only place where
you recognize as brother and sister, because other places we couldn't go to the dinner theaters, we couldn't go to the club, so to speak, we couldn't go to recreational facilities. All we had was the church, and the church became our powerhouse, our unifying entity, but also a community requisition of need and support that built the church and made the churches what they were then.
So as you were coming up, obviously, I'm sure you were raised in church,
right?
Especially during those times, that being the only place you guys could gather. When did you kind of recognize that you had that calling?
Actually, I recognized the calling at 9 years old. I did not act upon it. I really felt like I was too young, so I waited until I was the ripe old age of 11.
Okay.
So, and at that time, I recognized the call, and I was only 50% willing to accept it on condition.
Okay.
And God didn't give me the condition I wanted, so I didn't fully accept it then. But I was preaching then and actually pastored a church. Left When I graduated high school, left town quick as I could to join the military, where I could be at liberty to act and live the way I chose. And
Mhm.
certainly, for about 6 months, it was not in the church.
Right.
But God brought me back to my roots and to my calling, and then I was able to accept it and start to invest into my own calling and try to decide what area of ministry was I being called. Oftentimes we know we have a calling, but we don't know what area that we're
Right.
being called.
Right. And we touched on that last week, and that not everyone can do everything.
Right.
And even with that, a lot of people want to do something that is just not where they're called. You
This
may
is
have a
true.
talent
Yeah.
and you may have an ability, but that's not where God
It's
wants
not
you.
a calling, right?
So,
It's not a divine calling.
and so how do you, for those listening at home, and I know this experience is going to be different for everyone,
Right.
but when we talk about finding your calling or listening to your calling, I did a video about hearing the whispers of God. When you have a talent and a desire, but that's not where God's calling, how, as a leader, how do you help people find that? But then for yourself, how did you realize, okay, you're an outstanding musician, for example, but you are often the voice
Right.
behind the church. So how did you feel like, oh, I love music, I want to play music, but
It's so funny you mentioned that, because my desire was to be a jazz musician, and I did get a chance to dabble with that.
Mhm.
But that was not a fulfillment in that area, because I knew that wasn't my divine calling. I tried several other things, like being an evangelist, going from town to town preaching, and that wasn't as rewarding. It was I was left with a void, and I said, as it's written in the word, Lord, what would thou have me to do?
Right.
And he said, I asked you to preach, but I want you also to lead my people in a leadership capacity. And I was able to embrace, I was about really 17 years old when I began to embrace the ministry of pastoring.
Okay.
And at that time, fresh out of the army, I went to school and tried to sharpen the gift. And I encourage any young preacher to find out what your gift is and sharpen it.
Mhm.
Any knife will cut,
Right.
but a sharp knife cut more effectively.
Absolutely.
And I ask people to try to determine what your calling is. Be confident in your calling, what God is calling you to do. And even through the challenges, God will still direct your path, and he will navigate your steps if you just be true to what you're called to do.
Right. Because the word says that we're all called to
Right.
be, preachers and teachers of the word. And I guess there's a difference between being someone who delivers a word and being someone who leads a flock.
Right.
And so how do you determine what direction that looks like?
Well, that's going to take much prayer, much preparation. God, again, what would you have me to do?
Mhm.
And to be able to know the voice of God. And it's going to ultimately require a very close relationship, a very personal and intimate relationship with God, to know the word and to know what he's saying to you. Because a lot of things we'll want to do, and we'll hear voices that are not necessarily the voice of God.
Right.
And we'll try to be in cooperation and also in agreement with those voices.
Right.
But ultimately, they won't lead us to the full. Now, I could play music well enough to get by with a jazz ensemble,
Mhm.
but that wasn't my fulfillment. That wasn't my calling. What God wanted me to do in terms of leadership, in terms of putting people where they need to be in life. And before I could get them there, I had to get me there.
Sure. Now, do you find that it takes trial and error in every instance to determine how you need to move?
Well, the Bible says iron sharpens iron.
Right.
Trial and error refines us. It defines us. It let us know who we are, and where we need to be. And you won't know the struggle. I can listen to your struggle, and I can have a sense of sympathy.
Sure.
but I won't know the struggle if I haven't experienced
Right.
struggle. And once we have experienced it, we can more fully and effectively speak to struggle. I know where you've been because I've been there.
Right, right. And, the word talks about, that, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but that, your trials give you experience, and then that experience gives you hope.
Right.
And I think the experience, like you said, also gives you direction.
It does. It does.
And so that helps you understand where you need to be going.
This is true.
So as a leader, when you're sharpening iron and you're helping an individual find that path, do you find that it is easier from a leadership position to understand where they need to go, or is it cooperative where you're both trying to figure it out?
One thing, if you don't have comprehension, you won't have understanding.
Right.
And through my own comprehension, through my own experience, and I've had several years of it, I'm still learning. But you find that what I have learned, sometimes it can serve a twofold benefit. First, it can help you have the benefit of my era.
Mm-hmm.
And where you won't have to experience the grind, iron on iron, that I experienced. And I tell you, that won't work,
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there are those I'm going to try it for myself and find out that don't work.
Right.
And then they are able to tell others that don't work. And then the second area is it helps rebuild your moral and your spiritual character. Your moral turpitude becomes refined as you become mature in manhood. And Christ said that we should mature.
Mm-hmm.
We have to grow in grace, from grace, dimension to dimension, because it's a shame before the throne of Christ that we remain babes.
Right.
Always.
Right. And I know Noah and I talked about that, and Aaron and I talked about that same thing. We were talking about the opportunity that he and I have had that was unique, and helping and watching each other grow and mature and find that calling and find out who we are. Something you talked about was, your generation versus some of the new generations. What do you find is the most difficult bridge to gap between generations in terms of honing leadership?
Okay, it's funny you'd ask that. I had this discussion earlier today with a younger guy, because he feel like that young people have more liberties than we do, which is true in a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
But with more liberty comes more responsibility and accountability. We had, again, nothing else but more or less each other. And we could lean upon and depend on and trust and support and pray for one another.
Mm-hmm.
We were glad to be in fellowship. That's why we held church from 9 a.m. until 6 in the evening, because we had nowhere else to go. We had nothing else to do. But now, in making, I'm the average parent. I want my kids to have better than I had.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes in our effort to do that, we really cause our children to miss out on a lot, because they don't have the discipline. I had the teachers that would stomp your butt. Yeah. They would really, because they saw something in you that you didn't have the ability to see in yourself. They held you to a standard that was uncompromised. And they held that standard because you were going to be somebody.
And I guess in that time when you had to depend on each other, that was, I don't want to say a rite of passage, but I mean that's kind of an honor just to have someone invest that kind of time in you.
They did,
because they recognize that things are going to change, and change is going to come, and because of that, I must prepare this young mind to be a leader, or to be someone that can help facilitate that change.
We took for granted, and it was for all practical purposes, the need for education. We wanted our children to go to college and further education and get degrees and masters and doctorates, and that's good. But we lost that generation. Everyone realistically can't go to college.
Right.
Some don't have the academical ability. Some don't have the financial ability. But this where we would have, in my day, were vocational schools, trade schools where you can learn plumbing or welding or sewing or electricity. And the world is still wide open for that and will be
forever. I mean, until technology changes to where you no longer need those things, there's always going to be a service.
And so these are wide open fields for kids. And there are people with PhDs that are working at McDonald's to try to make their ends meet because the field they have studied, there's not an open in the respective area in geographical location they're in.
And that makes it very difficult, to be able to help someone get somewhere when there isn't a job. I have lots of friends myself who are, master's degrees, highly intelligent, very driven individuals, but there is no job opportunity.
Right. And they have a need.
And there is a need, yeah, and absolutely. So, within the church, do you see that same kind of situation happening?
Most definitely.
Where you've got people who have a passion and a drive for something, and maybe even the calling, but there's no platform.
Right.
How do you overcome?
Well, you're really stuck with two things to do. One thing you can probably try to market the geographical locations around you, see if you can plant yourself in a new location. A lot of people don't want to leave family and friends. A lot of people don't want to leave home. But sometimes we have to leave home. Another thing we have to do is try to market something in the area that we are good and gifted in doing. Maybe refine that and present a service in that, and not just be a leaf blower, but be a professional, skillful leaf blower. Be good at what you do, and your gifts will go before you.
Absolutely.
And be able to challenge people to look, I do this. There's no shame in this, and you can do this. I know a man that was a cook in a church in Alabama, and cooking. You didn't have to go to culinary school. They just cooked pretty good, And he cooked and put 3 of his children through college.
Cooking.
And he would do special things and weekly things. And he retired from cooking. He was able to buy a new car every 4 years. He retired from cooking. He bought a brick home. He lived a good life. And God skillfully sharpened his gift. Right. And his gift worked for him.
And that's a great point, guys. And we talk about this, and I love that this has come up because this is something that a lot of people struggle with. And I think it's a lot of things that we see, especially in the spiritual, when we're trying to figure out what God's calling us to do. And everyone wants to be center stage. Everyone wants to be in the limelight. We talk about that. Everybody wants to be the choir director. Everybody wants to be the pastor. Everybody wants to be, the person of notoriety. But if you don't have janitorial staff, right? You've got a dirty church, right? If you don't have greeters and you got nobody welcoming, bringing in the spirit. And guys, we're not saying that any position is any less than other. What we're saying is that when you find a home within any community, church or otherwise, it behooves you to make sure you're the best at that because you are part of a larger mechanism.
This is true.
And I think people forget that sometimes.
And it takes all the spokes to make the wheel turn.
That's it.
It takes all of the spokes to make the wheel turn. I just, as recent as yesterday, I acknowledged my janitorial staff. Look, guys, thank you for keeping this church clean. Let us coming into a clean and safe church. Thank you for being what you do.
That's it.
Because I can do it. I'm not ashamed. I don't have the time, and we're dependent upon them, and a lot of people take for granted they do it. But these people are needed. I know a young man in Charlotte that started a janitorial service because he had challenges. But he said, well, I started cleaning house and then a few buildings, then downtown Charlotte, then, and right now he got $1 million industry, janitorial service.
That's it, guys. You never know where God is going to take you as long as you are in a position of humility,
right? To
accept that, you might not be a choir director and you may be talented, but that might not be your path.
That's not the.
And if we talk about the Bible, talking about if you are faithful in small things, I will make you faithful over large things. And paraphrasing again, of course, but I mean, that's kind of a perfect example. You know, you can start out and it may seem mundane and it may seem like you're the low man on a totem pole, but you have no idea how God is going to elevate you.
I taught resource education at a school in Knoxville, Tennessee. A young man that were academically challenged.
Mhm.
Uh, Obviously wasn't college material. Went to a trade school, became a barber. He owns 5 high-class barbershops around Nashville, Tennessee area, and he's raking in money.
Mhm.
He's married with children, live in a good area of Nashville, and he's doing exceptionally well. Well, people with, and I'm not saying I have a doctorate. I'm not saying don't get education. Do that if you can. But there are also other areas of life we cannot give up, because I know people who are lifetime students.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and but what are you going to do with it? What do you hope to? Where do you hope it will place you or promote you?
Right.
You know, we can't let the system of education pimp us. You know, we can't do that.
Yeah.
We've got to be able to do that, because people are 65 years old still paying student loans.
Which is absurd.
Yeah.
It really is. And like you said, you know, what kind of irony and slap in the face is that to still be paying student loans and never been able to get to the career place
Right.
to get
Of
those
their
paid off.
choosing.
Yeah.
And just to be recognized in a dignified society. You know, you can recognize me in Bill's plumber service, 24-hour service,
Mhm.
because plumbers get paid.
Yeah.
Electricians get drywall, concrete. These guys get paid,
Yes.
And a lot of folks, we measure sometimes success and worth by the job people have. Maybe they wear a suit and tie to work today, and they are working big. You can see dignity, respect goes a long ways in whatever you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, many of our national politicians are wearing suits and ties, but they have lost their dignity,
Certainly.
their moral spirit of unity. It's become a selfishness, a greed now. More.
That's it.
Do
you find that, not the remedy, because it's multifaceted and we need to do several things, but would you say that in order to begin the reconciliation process, is it about faith, or is it simply a matter of recognizing that we are all human beings in the same struggle?
Well, you're going to have to put that in a mix, and I'll say that. And the reason I'll say that, social injustices are primarily issues of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
If I do you wrong for whatever reason, I respect the fact that Black Lives Matter, but I should be as aggressive and I should be as adamant about, in the event that a black officer shoot a white boy down in the street.
Completely. It's still a complete injustice.
It's wrong. And if I'm going to address that, I need to bring awareness to all injustices.
Yes.
And it's important that we realize the injustices are ultimately matters of the heart. Obviously, society has not been able to solve the problem over the years,
Mm-hmm.
because realistically, America did not start right.
Historically, you're correct.
So we'll leave that where it is.
Yeah.
So these are issues you can't lay a brick wall crooked, and over years after the concrete is set up, beat it back into place. It's going to require tearing down
Mm-hmm.
and rebuilding. And some things have got to be restructured, but these things are issues of the heart, because I won't recognize you as human until I am right. And there's no law. Now the law can make me act accordingly out there, but that have no issue in my heart, because you're still going to be to me whatever I think you are.
No matter how the law tells me.
Regardless of what the law says. So it's necessary that we start examining self.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, this must make us must make us an accountable people.
Sure.
But you can't be accountable until you are responsible. You are responsible, like I am, for our own actions.
Yes.
We're responsible. No one made you do it. I done it. I must suffer the consequence. All choices have consequences.
Yes, it
We
is.
have to suffer the consequences of our action. That brings on the accountability.
And then hopefully there's transformation.
Hopefully, then this will start leading to transformation, because locking me away don't make me sorry always for what I've done.
No.
It just let me pay that debt.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I legally paid the debt, but my heart is
It's
still the same.
still
There's
the
no
same.
change. So we've got to try to maybe come. The only way is through Christ Jesus, that it can
Be
fix
transformed
issues.
by
Right,
renewing of
be
the mind.
transformed.
Yes.
The renewing of the mind.
And out of the heart, right? Your mouth speaks. So it's you think it, and then you feel it, and then it comes out. So
Yeah. And when it come out other than that, you see, when the heart and the mind is not consistent with the mouth, that produces a lie.
That's it, man. We are out of time, and I knew this was going to be fantastic, guys. I hope you all were enriched by this. We will likely have him come back on. There's some other things that I'm working on, other big projects. Hopefully, we'll have a large roundtable discussion with several of these wonderful individuals. But it has been my distinguished pleasure. This has been wonderful. Guys, don't forget the 60 Days of Casual Word is available on Amazon. Like, share, subscribe. Again, I appreciate you guys for paying attention, for the increase in views and subscriptions. Don't forget that you can donate to this radio broadcast to keep us going and to help us get more things accomplished in our communities. As always, let's change the way that we think so we can change the way that we live. And until next time, stay blessed.